welcome to another video from Dazzatron's Diorama Llama. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a base for your Thundercats figures.
Thunder! 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 Thundercats! Ho!
Okay, so we're going to start by making one of the arms from the Thundertank. So as you can see here, I'm using one of the Super 7 figures. So this is Panthro. I'm sure you're aware. So yeah, I'm just kind of getting a stance, if you like, putting him into a particular pose, just so I can see how he fits. So at the moment, I've measured this at 4 inches, but I'm thinking I want it a little bit more narrow than that. I think that would be quite big. So I'm going for 3 inches instead. So I'm just going to mark that out. And the nice thing about that, each claw then will be 1 inch wide. So it's nice and easy to kind of measure. There, the length of the arm, I'm looking at the moment at around about 8 inches. And it just gives me a bit of room, a bit of flexibility to kind of shorten that a little bit later on. But it's always better to have a little bit extra, which you can take off, as you can't really, well, it's a bit more difficult to add styrofoam on top of, or to fit it together a bit later on. So again, just measuring that out. And I do shorten the arm a bit later on in the video as it is too long. So again, it was a good idea to just give myself that few extra inches. So I've got a bit more room to play with. So I'm just marking out where the front of the claws will be. So it's useful to have a Sharpie pen, or a felt tip would do. And of course some sort of, measuring tape or ruler. So this is really important, just to kind of get your measurements how you want it. And again, to have your figure at hand, so you can just kind of check back to see how the figure fits. Now, I appreciate some of you might want to swap out figures and might want to use these display stands for different figurines or collectibles that you might have. So I'm just marking in the claws. And so yes, I want a tapered edge. So I'm looking at about 3/4 of an inch from the top. So I've just got that kind of slanted edge. And then I'm using that same measurement to kind of create the width, if you like, of each kind of finger. So I'm just marking that out on both sides now. And again, checking if the character fits. And then, yeah, I'm just using a regular kind of coping saw just to cut that down. You could use a styrofoam cutting tool, just whatever you got at hand really. And so then I'm just using a file just to sand that down and just give it a smoother edge. Just filing down the top as well. You do tend to have kind of a shiny coat or texture when you kind of get out a new piece of styrofoam. And I quite like to just file that away. It depends what you're looking for really, what kind of finish you want. So I'm just marking in those fingers or those claws again. So again, about 1 inch wide. I would suggest not using your kitchen surface like I am here. It was just an available space at the time. Don't tell my wife, because she will kill me. Yeah, so I marked the top and the front and the sides there. So now I can start to add a bit of detail using the rod tools with the electric foam cutter. So I'm just kind of working out, yeah, how the back end of the arm will sit. I want to give the impression that the Thundertank is kind of pushing its way underground and kind of pushing these kind of boulders and the soil away. So I want it to look like it's coming from underneath the ground. So I'm on this kind of tapered edge, and as you can see, I'm using the electric foam cutter there just to take off as much as I can, and then using the file to kind of get it nice and flat. It's quite difficult to do that with a file, so it's a good idea to have a decent grit sandpaper, really, just to kind of remove those extra bits and give you a nice flat surface at the bottom, because obviously you want it to sit right. You don't want it to be kind of wobbling all over the place. So I'm just checking out now. I'm holding the back there, and I quite like the way that sits. The top is now kind of flat or level, so it just means the character stands quite easily on top of that. Although it does actually change when you see the final piece, you'll see it doesn't stay that way. So just making a little bit of a groove just where the, I suppose, the paw meets the arm, just again to add a bit of detail in there. And I'm going to start to make, yeah, one of the claws. So I've just cut down a little block of styrofoam. Got a rough idea what the size is. I'm just using sandpaper to get the finish that I want for that. And as you can see, that works nicely. So I just need to make another 2 of those. So this is the rod tool that you get with the electric foam cutter. Be very careful with this. It's very easy to go too deep. It does get very hot. So gently does it, really. Go quite slow. Try and keep your hand nice and steady. And you just want to very lightly touch the surface. Now you could just use a small file to do this. It really is up to you. So again, just very lightly, just touch the surface. And you can see, just kind of creates this little bit of detail. And so I'm just going to do the same to the bottom and the sides. You can see how hot this gets, all the smoke that's coming off this. And then I'm using a small kind of round file just to, yeah, kind of smooth that down a little bit more. And then I'm using the floristry knife just to taper that edge, just so that the fingers have got a raised edge on the top. And then using a flat file just again to smooth that down and just make those corners nice and neat. So I've added the extra claws. I haven't glued them on just yet. I'm just kind of putting them in place. And again, seeing how the figure sits on top. And yeah, I'm happy with that. So the next thing I want to do is to create some of the, I suppose, the parts or surrounding the arm of the Thundertank. So I'm going to make some boulders. So I want these kind of rock formations. So just cutting off a block of the 2-inch styrofoam. And with the electric foam cutter, I'm just taking off the edges just to make it a bit more rounded. Now, I don't want these to look too realistic. At the end of the day, you know, this is a cartoon, so I wanted to have that feel to it. So I'm just trying to get the size that I want. So I've got a variety of, if you like, boulders or rocks here. And you can see I'm not being really neat there. I'm just getting a rough cut, if you like, and then I'll work back into these with the floristry knife in a moment. So that's what I'm about to do now. So again, if you've seen my other videos, I tend to liken this to peeling an apple. You know, you just kind of taking little chunks away, and the more you do that, the better the effect, really. When you use the foam cutter, it tends to create a shiny finish, and sometimes you get these kind of curved edges, and you might not want that. So it's your preference. You know, it really is subjective. You might like that kind of finish. If you don't, just go back in with the floristry knife or whatever knife you've got at hand and just start to chip away at the surface, and you'll get the finish that you want. So I'm just kind of placing these out just to see if I've got enough and seeing how it looks with all the pieces together. And again, I think that's working quite well. So I just need to make the larger base there that these parts are going to sit on top of. So this is a thinner piece of styrofoam. This is about a 1 inch, I think. So I'm just placing the different parts out. As you can see, the arm is a little bit too long. I don't want the back of the base to be quite that length. So I'm going to shorten the arm. And I'm just getting a rough idea how much space I need. So here again, just in a bit closer detail, I'm just using the floristry knife just to chip away and kind of create a more angular finish to the rocks. I'm not trying to smooth it out. I want to keep some of those kind of rough surfaces that I created with the foam cutter. Another good idea is to just kind of cut into the foam and then, yeah, pull it back. So just kind of break it off. And again, you get these nice kind of edges and forms. So don't be too precious, really. The more you cut away, I suppose in one sense, the more realistic the finish. So then you will have seen me use this before. I'm just taking a ball of foil. Just kind of squashing that down so it's quite hard. And then pushing into the surface of the styrofoam. And particularly for kind of rock formations, it just gives a really nice texture. So I've kind of cut around the edge of the base again with the styrofoam cutter. I'm just kind of going in and out just to create an interesting kind of edge, really. And then again, I'll go back in with the knife and just again chip away at that until I'm happy. So again, I'm just placing the items back in place. And this is what I was just talking about. I'm just kind of chipping away at the edge. I don't want, as you can see, you see how shiny that is? You've got these quite smooth edges. I don't want that. I want it to be some detail in the sides there. So just using the same technique as we did before, just kind of cutting into one edge and then kind of lifting or chipping off the foam. It would kind of create that look that you want. So I've started to dry brush the boulders there, and I've given the arm a coat of silver. I've also glued on the claws there, and I've just used a bit of black in the kind of the indents just so they kind of really stand out. And I've used a a wash of black, or you could use the dry brush effect just on the edges, just to kind of create a bit of interest again. So again, I'm just thinking about where I want these to be positioned. And so essentially this is I suppose the first bit of the paint job. So I've used a burnt umber. So that's a dark brown for the undercoat of the rocks. And then I've used the dry brush effect on top using yellow ochre and burnt sienna. So before I add any more paint effects, I just want to glue these in place. The reason why I've painted the arm and the rocks first, it just makes it easier when I'm adding kind of further textures, because then I haven't got to get into these kind of bottom areas. I've already done that, and it's just a case of gluing them in place. So I'm using Gorilla Glue again for this. Again, you do need to dampen one side or one surface and keep the other surface dry. And then you just want to take a very small amount of the Gorilla Glue and place it onto the dry side. It will expand when it reacts with the moisture. So that's why you want to put a small amount in place. So you can see you don't need much at all. And then where you've dampened the other surface, just then position your two pieces and kind of just press them together. It's quite a good idea to put something heavy on top just to hold them in place, at least for a couple of hours. And then you should be able to kind of, just remove that afterwards. And then just repeat that method for each piece. So to create the soil kind of texture, I'm just using a bit of sand there. And this is actually just kind of the cuttings from where you're sawing into the styrofoam. You get these shavings. So if you just take a block of styrofoam and just kind of rub it over the top of the saw blade, you'll get lots of those little bits, and it's ideal for this technique. And then you saw me just use some PVA, and I've got again a bit of the burnt umber paint there to mix in. So I'm just adding a bit of sand to these kind of styrofoam shavings and just mixing that together. And then I'm adding a good portion of the acrylic paint. Again, this is burnt umber, so it's kind of a darker brown. And I'm just going to mix that together. Do give it a really good mix, because all the sand tends to go to the bottom. So you just want to give that a good stir. Now acrylic does tend to, when it dries, it becomes quite a kind of flexible plastic. So just to kind of help it to, adhere to the surface of the styrofoam, I'm just going to add a bit of PVA glue as well. I don't think I added quite enough. It did work, but I think I would add a bit more than what I did. So just give a good squeeze of PVA, but I would probably add double that if I was going to do this again. And again, just give it a really good stir. And you can see it kind of almost looks like mud now. And you're just going to use the brush just to kind of take a chunk of that and just kind of blob it onto your surface. And that's the thing, you don't want it to be smooth and flat. You want that kind of nice bumpy finish. You want it to look like, again, this arm is kind of coming out of the ground. So I'm just kind of blobbing it on for now. And then I will flatten it a little bit using a knife just to kind of push it into the areas where I want it to be. Now what I'm trying to do is to disguise the edge of the arm. So again, it looks like it's coming out of the ground. And then, as I said earlier, I'm just using the floristry knife here just to kind of flatten out some areas and kind of push it into or underneath some of the kind of the boulders that are in place. So you can see I'm almost there now. And again, I'm just pushing as far in as I can. I don't want any of the grey styrofoam kind of coming through. Now, of course, where I've placed some of the objects, I have kind of created these kind of little pockets or holes in places, which is a bit trickier to get to. So using something like a knife or a thin brush just to get into some of those areas is quite a useful tip. And you can see here there's a couple of grey spots, so I just need to get into there with a smaller brush. It's got quite a glossy consistency at the moment, and obviously it's a wet material that you're using, and the PVA is wet at the moment, but when it dries off, it will have much more of a matte finish to the surface, so it will look a lot more like soil. And I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. And because we've got PVA mixed in with this kind of mixture, we can just add some of the smaller rocks on top, and we don't need to use any more Gorilla Glue for that. They would just kind of adhere to this kind of soil texture. And we're pretty much there. So yeah, because the Thundertank arm has come up out of the ground, I just wanted to kind of weather the surface a little bit. So I'm just using a wash of the same colour, so it's this kind of burnt umber colour, just with a bit of water there, and I'm just kind of dragging that over the kind of, if you like, the knuckles or the end of the claws, just so again it looks like it is kind of dragged through the ground. And again, it stops the claw from looking so shiny, so I think it just makes it look a bit more interesting. And so you can see now the surface is dried, so it's got this kind of nice matte finish. It does look like soil. And you can see where I've added some little details in places as well, just these kind of little blobs, again just to make it more interesting. So I'm just going to show you the technique of dry brushing. I know you've seen this before, but just in case I've got any new viewers, so just take one of the rocks with a undercoat of the burnt umber, or just a bit of black and brown if you want a darker finish, and then I'm starting with the burnt sienna, which is the kind of reddish brown. And then I'm using then the yellow ochre, which is the kind of golden colour, over the top. So dry brush is simply where you add a bit of wet paint and then you dry the brush off onto a rag or a towel, and then just kind of wipe that over the surface. I've added in some of the extra accessories that you get with the Super 7 figures. and I'm pretty happy with this. So, you know, as you can see, it's not too difficult. So hopefully you'll have a go yourselves and see how you get on. So I'm just trying to show you the finished piece from a variety of angles. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing for those who already have. If you haven't, please do like, share and subscribe. And do tune in again next time.